Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby. We are here at the Fix EMEA Trading Conference in London, and it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Paul Brennan from Imandra. How are you?
Good, Toby, and you?
Listen, great to have you on here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming through, and you're on a panel later on, you're talking about AI.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what's coming up, and before we do that, give us a little bit of background about yourself and your company.
Sure. Paul Brennan, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Imandra. Imandra are an automated reasoning company. Not many people know what that means in this circle, so we'll spend a bit of time talking about it today.
Yeah.
In essence, we specialize in a traditional variant of AI, which is grounded in mathematical logic, symbolic AI. And there's a strong place for that in the current trend of agentic AI, which we can talk about today. It's a hot theme in 2025.
Fantastic. So you are talking later on today. You're also out in New York a couple of weeks ago with some of my very great friends. It was a really great panel that you had there with Rebecca, Sigma. You had Dan Shepard and that sort of stuff that were there. So a really good group. You launched it out. It was a Beton launch, wasn't it? Etc. Out there. You guys are all involved talking AI. Everyone's talking AI at the moment.
Yeah.
You guys are actually getting some use cases out of it and trying to push the agenda further forward. So tell us a little bit about what you're talking about later on today and some of the themes that you got from that time in New York as well.
Well, very quickly, the New York thing was held at the UK Consulate, a great forum, a roundtable with 20 people, and it had buy-side representation, AI technology firms, and some market structure experts. We spoke about AI adoption across those firms, interesting use cases, challenges, and what the future looks like. And that's broadly a theme that will be mirrored on today's panel.
Yeah.
We could talk all day about, systemic risk posed by AI, and I think that's a separate conversation.
Yeah.
But today's focus is going to be on firms on ramp with their AI journey. What we've seen across both sides of the pond is that some firms have only just started using ChatGPT to summarize an email.
Yeah.
Whereas others have used it to analyze large data sets and generate novel trade ideas, which humans missed. So there's this huge spectrum of adoption. We don't think this is a buy versus build debate or a cloud versus prem debate. I see those things as behind us now. This is how can firms start using this stuff in a useful way to benefit their business. And my closing thought on that last point is everybody's needs are different. So this is now about assembling all of these different AI tools and building AI agents to meet your needs.
Yeah, I think that's so important you said that, isn't it? Because this is about personalization, this is about making sure that everyone's there and not just having one thing which everyone jumps into. And I think this is a great opportunity to get ahead of the crowd.
Yeah.
If you get this strategy right, your ability to turbocharge your business is there. And
huge.
Two of the big words that have been used around everything in every show that I'm at the moment are productivity and efficiency.
Yeah.
The only two things that can really, in a time of huge volatility, the only two things that can really differentiate a business at the moment.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot on the show recently about the move from speed to quality.
Yeah.
Quality is where AI can come into it, and we're talking there about what allows that quality to come forward, and that sort of sits in the data. So when we're talking about challenges, you sort of touched on it briefly beforehand about the trust issue and those sort of things, and the threat issue, just as much as the trust issue that comes around it, particularly in these markets. But then we're also talking about the ability for it to have the right data set behind it. There's some amazing work that's being done into it, and you guys are all across all of that.
We are. Well, we have to work with AI firms, right? We work with the large language models provided by the big players because we need them when we build our own agents that we use to present tools to users who then build other AI agents. Very quickly, we're talking about agentic AI, and I think it's just worth summarizing that one for people because it's early in 2025 still. But what we're really talking about is a process of separate autonomous systems, each one backed by a large language model that's making autonomous decisions, acting with agency, often with guardrails or human interaction. And then some of these AI agents that I've seen firms building are really interesting because there's typically one which quarterbacks all of the others. So it's very similar to how a human will perform a task to then present some content to a stakeholder group or a workflow. These AI agent systems are looking to replicate those types of tasks, especially monotonous tasks. That takes humans a long time. Right?
Yeah.
And I've heard a really interesting one, the sort of primary agent in this network of agents being referred to as the chief of staff, and that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So as we're talking about people using these things, firms need their data in the right place at the right time. There are some great fintech solutions out there for that.
Definitely.
People talk about Snowflake a lot. Then
they've really muscled into that sort of area, haven't they? And so they're partnering, interesting as well, they're partnering with a number of interesting companies in the space too, right?
Then people talk about, well, which choice of large language model do you use? Well, they're advancing all the time, and I'm not the expert to talk about the nuances from one to the next. But there's a lot going on in that space, and that's a separate podcast. Then you've got sort of user front-end tools. If you're a CTO at a firm and you want to present AI solutions to your users, you don't want them with a different log-on to different AI systems, right? You want a unified approach. So this is about firms putting together these building blocks to meet their needs. And some of these firms like, Sigma Financial, who we did the New York thing with, they've got a really interesting front end for presenting fundamental analysis and other financial analysis to their customers. Where Imandra's fitting in is really interesting. So our systems are grounded in mathematical logic. So, industry sectors like microprocessor design, aircraft control systems have always used these logic-based systems to prove correctness of, say, a collision avoidance system in an aircraft. These settings where you really don't want it to go wrong? Really, really don't want it to go wrong. And if you're building this network of AI agents that I just described, each backed by a large language model, which is sort of red flags because, hallucinations, lack of transparency, all of the concerns firms have. Well, one of the many tools people have available to them to instill trustworthiness into these AI systems is to use reasoning engines. What Imandra can offer, let's say an AI system has to analyze a complex situation or decompose code or process a transaction workflow where correctness matters. Reasoning engines can help with that. They help because they're deterministic, auditable, transparent. They don't require training on large data sets. And they're sort of grounded in mathematical logic. So if you have these logic-based systems embedded in an agentic framework, you can really get to some of these more interesting use cases that people are a bit nervous about at the moment. So I acknowledge there'll be a curve that people have to go. Getting
what accelerates that curve? Because obviously the wins are so great, and there is naturally that sort of hesitation and I'm looking for a better word than skepticism, but there's a skepticism about this, and the early adopters obviously have such an opportunity to express ahead, which is also laced with a little bit of fear and doubt and threat around that sort of thing. So what is the trigger point that allows this to become absolutely mainstream as opposed to something there where we're talking about it? I mean, the acceleration of conversation from a year ago at EraFix to where we are today is extraordinary, like genuinely extraordinary.
One of the things we'll speak about on the panel this afternoon is POCs, a proof of concept for using these tools. Customers first have to understand what they want to do with AI. What could they do to enhance the individual's career experience so that they can then work on more interesting stuff. So in order to start a POC, we're going to be speaking a lot about you just have to find somewhere to start. Measure the ROI on the POC, but think about how that fits into the bigger picture. And then find a framework within your organization to fail fast with that. Try and break down a few barriers around trial agreements. Can you work with synthetic data or the AI providers' own data sets rather than showing proprietary data sets, which is often a key challenge in getting started? If you can do some of those things and fail fast, then I think that will help with your on-ramp to using AI within your firm. That's the sort of implementation and technical side of it. Then the other side is people. A lot of POCs fail because they're not sufficiently sponsored by the top, right? Whether it's a CEO or sufficiently senior leadership, it's not just putting dollars on the table, but it's it is encouraging and fostering a culture of innovation, continuous learning.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of negative rhetoric around what it will do for people's jobs. I don't see it that way. I want people to have a very positive outlook with AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
And them to ask, how can I make my life better?
And how can I move my job into different areas? This isn't about replacement. This is something I think is really, really important.
Yeah.
It's about augmentation of people's jobs and making, and it's change. And people fear that sort of change in numerous different ways, aren't they? And when people can recognise that and retrain them and reskill themselves, that's the productivity gain, and that's the beautiful part of it. And I think that I want to touch. You mentioned the New York thing earlier on. That was a month or so ago now. You're here in London talking about AI with this over here. I think it's interesting to think that the general consensus is the US are ahead of Europe in the race. You're seeing something slightly different to that, would you say?
Notwithstanding, the US is very advanced in terms of building the AI tooling. Some people use this electricity analogy, right? They've designed electricity, they've manufactured that, but I'm talking about people learning how to use it in their organization for useful stuff. We don't see a large delta there between financial firms in the UK and Europe versus financial firms in the US. They all have comparable challenges, fiduciary responsibilities, regulated functions, control functions that have to be sufficiently confident with deployments. Right? So everyone's moving forward at a similar pace from what we can see. On the earlier point you mentioned around sort of augmenting people's workflows, careers, giving people the tools. It was a really interesting analogy from New York, which you might want to close on, but I thought it was perfect. Lots of aircraft have autopilot systems. Those aircraft do not fly without pilots.
Absolutely. That's a great way. I mean, it would be the perfect way to finish, but I want to do one more thing.
I'll stay all day.
And I could talk about it all day, so we're in a bad mix here. But to finish things off, look, if we talk about, I love that throwaway comment, but it's if we talk about 2025 being the year of the AI agent, talk to us about 2025 for Imandra. What's that look like? What's some of the things to be excited about?
So we have a forthcoming product launch. That will be very interesting for any engineer who's building AI agents, particularly if you're using programming languages like Python, if you're building an agentic framework that has some sort of critical function and you need to get it right, if you need to explore what your code does, if you need to prove the correctness of a system for a given reason, then they've got to give us a call, because the tooling that we're building will help those, I use the phrase AI builders, AI assembly, AI builders. They need to take a look.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I wish you the very best of luck with it. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing. Good luck with your panel later on today. And thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on the next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.